Great.
All right. Good morning. Thank you again. Let's do roll call. Stoyan.
Andrew?
I'm here.
Susan? Sue Kaufman?
Here.
We have Mark. He's an alternate. Mark Sniffen?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sean? Kallstrom?
I'm here.
Great. Corey Thomas? Corey? Todd Bayruter?
Yes,
Todd,
here.
I've been practicing your name. I'm getting better, but I'm not there yet.
You're perfect. Thank you.
Apologize for that.
Appreciate the effort.
Robert Graper? Chris Seaman?
Here.
Okay. Al Spalding?
Here.
Michael Bart?
Here.
Okay. And we have a quorum. Did I miss somebody? I guess not. We have a quorum.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else want to introduce themselves before we move forward?
Ken Roulette, Seattle Fire.
Thanks, Ken.
This is Shamim. I'm actually just joining from NRMCA for the first half hour of the call. I apologize, I have to leave due to a schedule conflict.
No worries, but thanks for joining. All righty. So review and approve the agenda. Again, it's pretty short. Do we have a motion?
This is Chris. I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll second. This is Al.
Thank you, Al. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? And motion passes. Next up are meeting minutes from November 3rd.
Do you see the minutes?
Yep.
Okay. You know what? Okay, so let's leave the minutes for the next council meeting. Again, I apologize. John is not here. He had an emergency and I was trying to fill in. So I see the minutes, I see the date, meeting date, October 20. So these are not the right minutes.
Okay.
And we will have the minutes for the next meeting. Apologize for that.
All right. Sounds good. So next up, I believe is what, reviewing sections.
I want to start, I don't know if Tom Young is here. We have only one chapter for the building code, the existing amendments, chapter 21.
Yeah, Tom did email us. Were you not CC'd on that? I can forward it on to you.
I'm not sure I have anything.
Okay, I'll find it here and forward it on. Okay, I forwarded on. Those were the amendments that Tom sent.
Okay, let's see. It's a long trip, I guess. Okay, I got it. There it is. So is Tom here or, excuse me, or somebody else needs to talk about this?
Shamim, did Tom talk to you at all, or did he
Not
brief you
on,
anything?
not on this specific issue, no. And
I-
I know
I-
that he is out today, so.
I had a discussion with John and Krista and Ray about this. So it appears that this is the ASTM E2558 was the new standard. It used to be Washington State Building Code Standard 31.2 prior to July 1st, 2013. And it's there because it allows some appliances that were certified before. So the recommendation, I guess, the staff recommendation is to keep it as it is.
Okay, yeah, that's Tom's recommendation too. I forwarded a second email to you
Okay.
that has his recommendation. So sorry about that. That was the incorrect email then. So yeah, he's stating that one should be maintained.
Okay. Do we have more sections? Let's open the.
And that was the very last thing you wrote down there, the
Okay.
last whack.
So the other one, the other one is WAC 5150 21070. He's recommending this can be deleted because the code language is now found in IBC, so the model code covers it. 5150 2111 should be maintained. He is suggesting a modification, and the council staff will take care of that. We will look it up and we will modify the language. And it will come back to the TAG members when we are done with our proposals and the existing amendments. So this will be discussed again. So you'll have the chance to see the modification.
All right, perfect.
The next one, 5150 2115 should be maintained. It's we already showed this on the screen, and this is how Tom has. This is everything for chapter 21.
Yep.
And again, we will fill out the cells with the TAC recommendations, and we will have it already in the report. I guess we will need a vote on this.
Yep. Any discussion on what Tom and staff put together? Sounds like they agreed on everything.
Okay, I just, are we going to be moving to ask staff to put it in a digestible form and then move it to the council, or are we going to be looking to move it to the BFP at this point?
There's a BFP meeting prior to the council meeting, correct, Stoyan?
We have the council meeting on 19th, and we will have the BFP meeting on 18th only if we get done the existing building code and IBC, if we get the reports done. If we are not ready, if we are not ready with the reports, then we'll keep it for the next meeting in December or January.
Okay, so the motion for this will be move it forward to the BFP committee.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Chris, you want to make that motion?
Sure.
You're in agreement?
Yeah, I trust that staff and Tom did a good job. I will move to move Tom's recommendations to the BFP.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? And the motion passes.
Okay, for the international existing building code, I think we covered everything, but if I've missed something, let me know. This not in fire code, they shouldn't be here, so we'll take care of that. Again, the appendix N shouldn't be here because of conflicts with the energy code. And if you don't have questions or concerns, we can close the existing amendments to the international existing building code.
Yep. Any questions or concerns?
So Stoyan, this is Mike Barth. And I apologize for the late submittal. Just before this meeting, I sent you kind of the analysis of the IEBC Chapter 14.
Okay, sorry.
And
There it is.
essentially in there, I just right now, the amendment is limited, or the exception is limited to R3 buildings. The state did an interpretation 16-05 that attempted to include school portables into that. But the reality is the language doesn't support it. And that has created some problems for, well, several of the jurisdictions that I do work for, we've run into this. And Krista had done some research for me, and she actually found where when they did that, the interpretation, part of the motion to accept that interpretation included language that they would fix the language. For whatever reason, it never got fixed. And so bottom line is, if we want to continue that amendment, and if the State Building Code Council's opinion is to exclude portable school classrooms, then an additional exception is needed, right? You know, as shown right there. That would make it consistent with the interpretation issued back in 2016, and at least eliminate that conflict. Again, this is all based on if that is the, you know, how the State Building Code Council really intended it. So.
And I assume this is the interpretation that you were talking about, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's why I went ahead and included that too, so it's easy. You know, and that was 5 years ago when the relocatable language was added to the code. And so the interpretation, I mean, to summarize, pretty much puts the portable school classrooms into that same exclusion. But the code doesn't really say that. The code's exclusion is limited to R3.
So
When I came across this, I had, you know, I talked to Krista about it. You know, I had thought that, well, maybe we need to do a code change, you know, a formal code change request to add that in, but it's one of those that, you know, I was kind of the messenger. I didn't have a dog in the fight. I was just the one having to enforce the code. And, you know, so in my opinion, it's like, it could go either way. But if the council really wants to exclude portable school classrooms, then, you know, my suggestion would be simply to add a second exception.
Mike, I think maybe even to pile on there, I don't know historically has the intent of most people applying the code to make a gold seal building that's moved into the jurisdiction comply with new code.
The way it's written, and the circumstances I had is essentially when you have an older, let's say, one of my examples is I had a 1992 school portable being moved from one jurisdiction into a different jurisdiction several counties away. Essentially, they got it free because, you know, it had used its useful life had been used up. So it was still a a labeled modular unit, but it was built in 92, certainly came nowhere close to satisfying any of the current energy code, accessibility. It had all sorts of problems. And, and so we raised the flag of, well, it needs to be brought up to current code. Based on the existing state amendment, that's what that amendment was saying. Well,
Todd, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to, thank you. I'm trying to understand, is it only the portable school classrooms or is it any valid LNI modular building? I think that's similar to what Chris asked. What happens if you strike portable school classrooms in this exception?
I put that in there mainly because the interpretation request was trying to lump school portables separately as being excluded, not other buildings. But
Are there examples that could fall under this category?
I don't know. I mean, portable school classrooms is where we see it the most often, but there certainly are job shacks and, portable office buildings and stuff like that certainly could fall into that same category.
Yeah, I agree. I see no reason to just say portable buildings with a valid LNI modular building insignia.
I have a question too. I'm not, I'm new in the state. So, so with these portable units, LNI is the enforcing agency, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, for the unit itself. However, once the unit gets installed, or to install a unit, it has to either have a current LNI package, or if it's being moved, like in the case of my example, we had a 30-something-year-old building that had 30 years worth of wear and tear on it since the last time LNI had anything to do with it.
Okay.
And and it's not LNI's responsibility, when they move the building, to go back and check it. At that point, it is essentially it's an existing building, and it's no different than moving an existing building. It was built to the 92 standards, and at that point, it's no different than any other site-built building built in 92. Now we're going to move it into a new jurisdiction. The fact that it has an old weathered 30-year-old LNI insignia on it doesn't give it free rein to be reinstalled, whereas a moved building would have to comply with code. So really the portable school classrooms is more the important part of the exception when you relate it to what the state was trying to do, or the council was trying to do with the interpretation.
But why would it be, from a code perspective, why would it be applicable to portable classrooms and not other portable buildings?
Well, it does. It is applicable to all portable buildings. It's whether the state wants to exclude portable school classrooms, for the purpose of, economic reasons or whatever. If they don't want that's essentially what the interpretation, that's how I read that interpretation, is that the council at that time wanted to exclude school portables, for, whatever political expedient reasons. And
Right, so if school portables are excluded, then I think, the argument would be that all portable buildings should be excluded.
Well,
then there's no point in the whole chapter.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
I guess other than site built, yeah. So they're
Right.
I think for
so it's certainly a discussion to be had.
I think for clarification on how I think we as Tacoma have been enforcing it, interpreting it locally. If it's a building with a gold seal on it, we don't get into it at all if it's moved around. As far as compliance with energy or anything inside of the unit itself, we're looking at it purely from a, can you get into it? And is it the foundation appropriate? And after that, we're just looking for the seal. If I think I'm having that correct. Yeah, Sue?
I would say we would not accept an old, skanky portable that's been floating around for, 30 years. I mean, so I would be looking for a current, most of the times you see something current. So I guess the question is, does L&I recertify these over a period of time? I mean, something that was a portable from many code cycles ago would not meet energy code requirements. So I guess I mean, I probably wouldn't worry so much if if it was on the same site, like removing our portable, at this school, we're just moving it over 25 feet. I definitely wouldn't worry about that. But if we're talking about, moving a portable that may not even be from the city of Tacoma, and
Well,
it's
technically,
old.
technically,
ahead.
this only applies when it changes jurisdictions. So if you're moving from one school to another within the jurisdiction, then it legally existed and it can continue to.
My personal
interesting.
thought is that this would probably be outside of our scope. L&I should, decide whether or not something can be moved and still certified. And then from there, if we want to put something in the code consistent with that, or pointing a finger over to what L&I states, then that would be reasonable. Al, you had your hand up. Did you still have something to say?
Well, L&I will recertify these buildings. We run into this. It's not really a building code issue, but we run into this at the Department of Health with temporary worker housing. It's not uncommon for a grower to purchase a bunch of units up in Canada, and they'll come down and try and relocate them. We have our own licensing chapter that we apply for this, but we require them to go to L&I and get certified with a current insignia. But if they have an L&I, an old one, whether it be 30 years old, we would, the Department of Health will accept that. But to answer your question, Sue, I do know, because we work with the factory assembled structures program quite often, that they will recertify if it meets requirements.
But I guess the question is how do you recertify, because the energy code has changed. And so essentially a gold seal building is supposed to be something that meets the current energy code. So, but that's an interesting note that this is only this relocating buildings. This is something that's located outside your jurisdiction. So if you have an old portable that even if it's moving from one property to the next and it's still within your same city, this code doesn't really apply. Is that it's not a relocated building?
Well, it says into or within.
Yeah.
Into or within. Oh.
Yeah. And that's,
Okay.
the more the,
Within.
I guess I should have clarified more the way it's been enforced as the way I've seen it. Obviously, if it's going, changing jurisdictions, then it's clear where, within a jurisdiction, I have seen a lot of jurisdictions accept portables that were within the jurisdiction to begin with, because it was already there, it was already accepted, it was already, it's not worsening. It is, it's moving the non-conformity from one site to another instead of creating a new non-conformity. So yeah, more of an interpretation enforcement provision than code.
It seems like there should be some sort of a timeline, like, building, valid L&I insignia within the last, 6 years or something, it's kind of covered in, code cycles.
And I agree fully on that. And realistically, that's what the L&I insignia is. It is saying at the time of original installation, this unit satisfies the current code requirements as a modular building. 30 years later, that doesn't apply anymore. You know, and so that's why I said that old weathered insignia means nothing, because the other part of the package, when you get a new L&I factory assembled building, you also get a packet of information from L&I that gives all the installation requirements for that unit. Well, 30 years later, you don't have that packet, you don't have that information, there's nothing, you know, all you have essentially is no different than an old collection of building materials that, you know, no longer satisfies any code.
Andrew, this is Ray. Might I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
I think that it's pretty defined. I think it's an RCW 35-1. Gosh, it's either 150 or 160. I think that it defines the manufactured home and what you can and can't do pretty clearly. It's hold on. I think it's one. Hold on, let me see here.
Well, it's
35-63-160. It kind of does it. It kind of gives you definitions and year and dates and years and I think the main intent of that was to kind of not allow local jurisdictions and stuff to put restrictions on them. But I just remembered this from back, so I looked it up real quick. I don't know if this would help answer any questions or not.
These are not manufactured homes. These are L&I approved buildings. So these are not homes. So that's different. Those are like HUD kind of structures. So we're talking about, so, you know, City of Tacoma requires manufactured homes to be new. We only accept new for, you know, installation. So, but portables that are, you know, commercial building portables, this is a different story, not homes. So the question is, and I think this code provision, well, it says group R3 buildings. I would have thought this code, well, I mean, this is a code provision in the IEBC, so I suppose, you know, we're maybe also blending IRC kind of buildings too. I don't know. That's a good question.
I just remembered it and I just thought I would bring it up. Sometimes the RCWs get lost in the mix sometimes.
But I think to me, manufactured homes are different. And I probably wouldn't I wouldn't be applying these regulations to those.
I would agree with that. Yeah, because this is not intended to apply to manufactured homes as defined. These are purely modular, IBC modular factory assembled buildings. And to Sue's comment on R3, that actually it comes from the amendment, not the code. So it's just old holdover language from before we had the IRC. You know, realistically, perhaps that line should be, you know, amended also to say, you know, IRC compliant single family, you know, or 1 and 2 family dwellings or structures, something, but the old R3 there comes from the amendment from the old language.
It seems like if we are going to exempt the portable school classrooms or all modular buildings, it should actually be done in 1401.1, the scoping section, because that in the model code specifically says it applies to relocatable buildings.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that.
Can I suggest something related to a procedure? Andrew?
Yep, of course.
So we can continue discussing this, or the other option is we can, well, somebody can submit a proposal for amending this language during the submittal period. And then we have more professionals in this area involved in the process. We'll get some more feedback. I'm afraid that if we keep it within the existing amendments as modified, it may be overlooked.
That's
Uh,
true. Yeah, we are bringing new information and new requirements into it. So I think
Usually,
that's a good idea.
the modified existing amendments are related to, reference changes or minor modifications to align with the changes in the model code. And this seems to be more like a bigger issue.
Yep. All right. See, Mike, do you mind submitting that when things open up as a proposal?
Sure, I could, and I'm certainly not opposed to, and I agree with Stoyan that that is the more correct way to deal with this. The reason I haven't done it that way is because I didn't really, it wasn't, I didn't have a dog in the fight. I'm not necessarily a proponent of adding the exception. I'm simply pointing out the discrepancy in the flaw and saying that we need to fix it somehow. But if that's what gets it started, then I'm certainly not opposed to submitting that myself if you want.
All right. Well, thank you. If anyone else is more passionate about it, feel free to. So, but Mike, yes, you brought it up as a potential issue. So yeah, whether you submit it or not, I guess your job is done. You notified folks who may have a dog in the fight. So thank you.
Yes. So if anybody is passionate about it, please let me know and coordinate. And otherwise, it is a flaw that needs to be addressed one way or the other. So
thank you. Okay, Stoyan, back to you.
Okay, so this was the last one. This was the last one in the existing building code. So 1401, we can keep it. Keep the existing amendment, but I will make a note that we're expecting a proposal. So we'll reintroduce the issue. So we are done with the existing amendments, which is great. And we need to move back to the significant changes. And I have a few here. I have chapters 1 through 3, significant changes. And I apologize again. I had to fill in at the last moment. My portion was the existing building code. So if I'm wrong about something, please, I apologize in advance. But I think these chapters 1 through 3 were submitted yesterday or a couple of days ago.
Yeah, yep, I sent them in. I copied you since
Yes,
John was out.
Okay, here it is.
Okay. Yeah, I can run through them if you want, Andrew.
Yep, please, Chris. Thank you.
Cool. Nothing entirely earth-shattering. Let's see. The code adds a pointer, that first one, 101.2.1. There's a pointer to chapter 11 in the IFC, which is also applicable to existing buildings. So that just seems to be a matter of good code writing and referencing that. The section 103 adds a fill in the blank that jurisdictions will need to be aware of to identify their code enforcement agency, their building department, or what have you. Just as I put it on there, it's not a huge change, just to maybe highlight it for jurisdictions to know they have a new fill in the blank to deal with. There is a new requirement for documenting the lowest floor level in a building that's within a flood hazard area. I expect that there's a cost associated with that because you have to figure out what that elevation is. So I don't know if that means a survey, probably. Right? So there's a cost associated with that. I don't think there's an amendment needed there because I think, do we already have other ordinance that requires that anyway? It's just not in the building code. So you're our flood expert. Does that sound, when someone does a remodel, in a flood hazard zone? Do we make them tell us what the floor level is?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So it's an existing requirement, just not in the building code. So maybe there's not a cost directly associated with that. Maybe that's not the right way to say that. We're just letting them know in another place that they have to do it.
I think it's just a
Right.
pointer. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
in the IRC, and so we would be enforcing it already, but now it's
Okay.
clear in the IEBC.
Okay, cool.
And in the state, the DOE regulations would require all of the jurisdictions to have that language in their flood management.
Okay, so now it's just
ordinances.
more accessible to designers and owners. Okay, cool. Let's see. What I found interesting on 110.4, which is the certificate of occupancy stuff. Let me make sure I'm in the right thing. So what I found interesting there is, let me make sure I grab the right thing. It says that the code official is authorized to suspend or revoke a CO when it's issued an error or on the basis of incorrect information. All the normal stuff it has in the past, but then it says, or other ordinance of the jurisdiction, which I found interesting. I don't know that I want the code to tell me I can revoke a CO because of somebody else's ordinance that I'm not directly in charge of. Does that make sense? I just wanted to see if there are other code officials that might have a hang up on there. I don't, Stoyan, are you able to share IEBC 10.10.4 and the 2021 code?
Not well.
Okay.
Yes. So
I just,
let's I need a minute to get there.
oh, okay.
You can keep talking about something else, and I'll
Okay.
find it.
Okay, cool. I don't know if it needed to be something we do something about. It just gave me some weird feelings, I guess, and I was going to see if it gave other people weird feelings.
This is Mike again. Again, I'm speaking from a former life here, but part of the rationale for that type of language is the CO itself is a building code reference document created and issued by the building official. A jurisdiction can revoke a CO, let's say for a zoning problem or zone, something non-compliant with the zoning code. The zoning code, though, doesn't have any tool or mechanism like the CO. And so jurisdictions use that language of the or other ordinance of the jurisdiction to bring in things like, public works standards, zoning codes, or any of that. As a building official in that situation, I, of course, wouldn't reach across the line and say, I'm going to revoke this because of a zoning problem. However, if the planning director sent me a notice requesting that I revoke the CO, for cause, then then I would be the building official would be the one then to act on that. And you kind of need that or other ordinance language as a result.
Does that exist in the building code already? Because it's new language in the IEBC.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's matching.
Very typical language in the charging language in the building code.
Okay.
So do you still need it? What section was it? 110?
Well, I wouldn't, I would think that the change probably just made it more consistent with regular building code language.
Okay, if that's the case, then that's fine. My concern is if I was in the position of the building official, I wouldn't necessarily want to have to revoke somebody's CO because of long grass. That seems like a spot that I would not want to be put in.
Yeah.
So, but okay.
Argue that either.
That's what that is then. The next section is 111.2.
I'm sorry. So what was the final outcome then?
No, Mike convinced me that no, there's not anything needed.
Okay.
It seems to be matching up more with the base building code.
So we don't
IBC.
need the the comment either, right?
Yeah, yep, that's fair.
Okay.
I still feel that way, but it's what it's been for a while, it sounds like, so.
Yeah, and I suspect most building officials, if their code enforcement officer is telling them to revoke a CO because of a, overgrown grass, most building officials, I think, would use that to say, no.
Yeah.
Give me something life-threatening, to do that. But
Gotcha.
it's to make it consistent with the language that, let's see, I did pull the page up here. Does not find violations of the code or other laws that are enforced by the Department of Building Safety. There's that language that kind of goes throughout, where it's always, the building code or other laws of the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Let me just make one comment. I have a slight agreement with Chris originally. The only part of that new language I don't like is shall not be valid. It doesn't give the building official authority. It says they shall revoke it. It's not a may, it's a shall.
In what I am looking at 110.4 in the 2021, it says that they're authorized to.
Okay.
Because that would be a big concern.
Yeah. Yeah, authorized to suspend or revoke, not required to.
Yeah.
I guess I was looking in 110.1 at the end of that.
Right here.
Yeah, that last sentence of 110.1 is added to. And the same sentence was added in the IBC.
And that also is very typical language with all your COs. And that's not saying it's not saying you shall revoke it. It's saying that certificates presuming to say this, this what's bad is good is shall not be valid. So
yes, I think that second to last sentence that was previously in the code says that, and I think this new last sentence says they shall not be valid. You shall revoke it. I see what Chris is saying.
Yeah. Well, shall not be valid and shall revoke are two different things. I certainly agree with your point, though.
All right. So you okay with that?
I think generally, yeah, that gives us another layer of if we make a mistake, it doesn't count.
Pretty much.
Yeah. 111.2 talks about temporary connections during construction. I was hoping we could maybe reach out and get some input from utilities. It says that the code official, it adds water system or sewer system for the purposes of testing or for use under temporary approval is under the authority to authorize those connections. 111 too, sorry, Stoyan.
Oh, sorry, 111 too.
And my only concern here is that I wouldn't want it to be misunderstood that the utility allows temporary connection. Like you don't get to touch the utility stuff unless they say it's okay. And my only concern was this might make that seem that way. Does that make sense? Like the building official doesn't get to say when you get to put power to a building. The utility says that, is my understanding of the authority there.
Chris, I think I would disagree. I think the building official does say that the utility gets to decide how you do it and what is safe and what meets code. But the building official says you can connect power to this building because it is, by connecting power, you're going to make it occupiable.
Okay. Yeah, if you think, if I'm
I
not,
agree.
okay, that's, okay, that works. Then it just adds water and sewer there.
So no here.
So no,
Okay.
and the utility will let you know if you go astray. In 115.1, the word buildings is replaced with structures. And it clarifies that vacant structures that are not secured from unauthorized entry are inherently dangerous structures. So that's a good tool for enforcement. I thought maybe we could put down yes as a cost associated with it, because if you have a vacant building and you don't have it secured, there is a cost associated with having to secure it. I don't think that anywhere else in the building and construction codes is a requirement to do that securing. I think it's in people's nuisance codes at their local jurisdictional level, if that makes sense. So it would be a new requirement in this code and would have a cost associated with it. Not that I think there's anything wrong with it. Does that make sense? Like, does everybody agree that would be a cost?
Yeah, but what this is doing is it's making it consistent with IBC language again.
Does IBC have the same language with
It does.
having
Yeah,
secure
in
buildings?
IBC 116,
Okay.
a vacant structure that is not secured against entry shall be deemed unsafe.
Okay, cool.
That's
That works
the
then. So then it's no, it exists already.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it's
cool.
just making it consistent with the IBC.
Okay, excellent. And chapter 2. The definition for change of occupancy was reformatted. It seems clearer to me. It just seemed like somebody had a problem with the way it was written out, but it doesn't say anything groundbreaking or new. There is now a definition of change of use. There was that section in chapter 10 that said what a change of use was. I guess they decided that that needed to be a defined term. So it was added. Okay, and then for chapter 3, sorry, let me get back to my thing. Sorry, I'm dealing on a little laptop screen. Too many windows open. Okay. So they did rearrange some items. Chapter 3, there's clarification that 302 to 309 applies to everything. Doesn't matter how you're trying to comply with the IEBC. It's applied. There's a reference to ICC 300 for assembly, like bleachers and grandstands and telescopic seating. I don't think that's new. I think it's just, where else would you go? I guess is the why it got thrown in there. For 302.21, there's a new section that references additional codes in healthcare. It says that existing I2 and ambulatory healthcare facilities, outpatient clinics, and hyperbaric facilities also need to comply with NFPA 99. I think that's what you would be having them do anyway, right, Al?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know that there's a cost associated. I think it's just more clarity.
No, I think it's for clarity, and it's probably been done in effort to sort of correlate the requirements of NFPA 101 or any of the, any of the healthcare facilities that are participating in federal reimbursement programs. So this is good.
Cool. I think I had a question mark on cost there. We could probably say no, since Al is going to make them do it anyway.
So you're saying no?
No to cost because it was a requirement by another agency already. And now it's just making it easier to comply. And so yes is the answer to my question there in the right. And then there's an entirely new section on storm shelters and how to do them when it's an addition or within an existing building. I don't know that we get this very often or ever, honestly, but it's there. I would say probably, I just didn't know what to say for cost because I guess you just wouldn't know how to deal with it before. And you might make them go to new, I suppose, which in this case, it would be probably less expensive to follow these rules. But there are at least some clear rules on it now. And so I would probably say no, Stoyan. I think you probably might have gotten to some of this on your own, but it's at least laid out for you now. They relocated the reference to 117.1. They just highlighted it so they didn't think it disappeared. 3052 adds a requirement to maintain the accessible means of egress during construction. I think that you may have enforced that already on your own, but if you didn't, now it's pretty clear that you must enforce that. A clarification is added in 306.3.1 that you can't reduce any accessible element during the alteration. It's got to be good or is better than when you started.
Of course not.
Yeah, right. But now it's pretty darn clear, I think. There are numerous relocated sections with regard to accessibility. I'm just highlighting them there so that people don't think they disappeared. 306.76 is a new requirement stating that exterior elements have to be at least 36 inches wide. And there hadn't previously been anything on the accessible exterior route in the IEBC. So I don't know how people dealt with that before. I suspect that might mean a cost increase depending on how it was enforced previously, if that makes sense.
There is a state amendment requiring exterior routes of travel being 44 inches
For new.
for new.
So maybe we should flag this for.
For new and now, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, go.
But Chapter 11 refers to ANSI A117 2017. So the minimum is 48, it's not 44. For existing buildings, what we need to check when the 44 inches became effective.
Our
amendment in 1101.2.1 that brings the 44 in. I thought it was amending something that said 36.
Yes, the requirement in ANSI 2009 was 36 and it was amended to 44.
Okay.
In 2021,
2017.
In 2017 is 48, so it's even more than 44.
Okay.
So would it make sense then, since we've had a wider requirement within Washington longer, to increase the 36 inches to match what we previously had at 44? Or it's worth the discussion at least?
What I can suggest is that we need to track, again, when 44 became effective, because for some older buildings, we don't want to create financial issues.
Okay, so perhaps I think then maybe the answer here is yes, we need an amendment, and maybe it's in the form of an exception for buildings constructed after a certain date. It is 44 inches. Does that make sense?
That would be logical.
Okay,
So we
cool.
have yes here, and let's keep the question mark for now.
Okay.
And I'll work on it.
Thank you. Okay, the next ones are more relocated elements. All of your accessible dwelling unit stuff, it now lives right there for the how many and when to provide them. There's new sections on smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. Those are already in the fire code in the retroactive fire code sections. So it's not a new requirement. It's just easier to find in the IEBC now. And then there's a new section on exterior envelope, and it tells you at what point you have to comply like it's a new exterior envelope. So I suppose people that know more about exterior envelope may want to look at that to see if that makes sense. What it says is if you're doing 2 or more contiguous stories and it's more than 15% of the total wall area on any side of the building, you have to comply with new construction for what you're doing for that replaced stuff instead of just matching what was there before. And I don't know if there's a need to tie that in with energy code at all, or our air barrier stuff, since it is a new section.
Any comments? All right, well, thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions on chapters 1 through 3? Are folks ready to move these recommendations forward to BFP?
This is Mike. I'll make the motion then to move these forward to the BFP.
Thank you, Mike.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Thank you, Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? And motion passes. All right, chapter 12.
So Andrea sent me this, and I'm not sure if she's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
I hadn't received the spreadsheet, so it looks really
it's okay. I will incorporate everything in the spreadsheet.
okay. Basically, through chapter 12, it just seems like they just changed some wording. So it didn't really, to me, change the meaning so much, as it was like a verbiage type thing. Let's see. And I don't know how in depth you want me to go with explaining all of this.
I guess go as in depth as you want, and if there are questions, we'll ask them.
Okay. So yeah, they just changed authorized to may determine, which I don't think is that big of a deal. And same with the including but not limited to. In 1203.4, they changed that a little bit too, to include verbiage for in buildings with automatic sprinkler systems rather than fully sprinklered. And then 1204.9 is a little bit more of a change. So I think they're basically just, if you scroll down a little bit. So it seems like they're kind of like, I don't know, expanding on the amount of products you might be able to use. I'm not super well versed in fire stuff, so.
Yeah, I
anyone
think
has
that's,
any.
I think that's mostly capturing draperies and kind of things like that that
Okay,
you might have in a historic building. You can coat them in nasty stuff to make them not burn.
yeah. And then for chapter 14, it looks like there's a whole new section about like bleachers and grandstandings and how they have to comply with ICC 300. So I'm not sure if there would be a cost associated with that, but possibly. And that's the only change for chapter 14. And then if you scroll down to chapter 15, the entire 1501.2.1 and then everything under that is completely new. So I think we probably should have a discussion about what those changes are, because they are fire related and if they're captured in fire code potentially. Again, I'm not well versed in any of that, so.
I have a clarifying question. Didn't we have chapter 15, the last meeting, 15 and 24?
I don't know.
I don't remember discussing.
I have a document here for chapter 15 and 24. Chris?
Oh, yeah. Was it me?
Isn't that for IBC rather than,
Oh,
this is
yes.
IEBC?
Yes.
Let's figure that out.
Yes, it was.
Okay, this is the building code. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I can show chapter 15. Here it is.
Yeah.
So let's see.
So essentially everything in the highlighted is all brand new.
150121. Let's go there. 1501. Well, it doesn't show this as new.
You know, I might have been looking at the last one. I don't.
I think it's
I don't remember.
1502.2.
1502.2. Okay. Yes, 1502.2. Here it is.
I think it's a good addition, and it's mirrored in the IBC chapter 33 as well.
So no amendment needed and no fiscal impact, is it? A correct statement?
I have a comment. I mean, this is, you know, blends a little bit into sort of maybe L&I. I mean, you know, retaining, this is during construction. These are construction safeguards. So, you know, is there anything with L&I that they have, that they say anything that with regards to, you know, retaining an excavation system? So it might be worth looking at, you know, what requirements with Washington State L&I.
We have an ex officio in the council from L&I. And he's new. Retired. So how do you suggest to do that? Do you wanna, well?
I guess the question is this needed? I mean, it's in the code. Do we need to adopt it, or does Washington State L&I have any different provisions? You know, that's just a question. Is, you know, this is kind of an overlap. To me, there's a little bit of an overlap with L&I. So
I don't know the answer, and we have a few options here. If the suggestion is that this section needs additional research, we can spend some time, or somebody from the TAG members more familiar with it. Or if the TAG suggests we will need an amendment to this section, which means striking it out, which is also an amendment to the code. Let's start with the research then.
yeah, I just think, I mean, maybe there's not, you know, potentially there could be overlap. I mean, L&I has to do with construction safety, and I would just like us to, you know, reach out to L&I and say, hey, you know, do you have any problems if this is in the code, and if we enforce it? I mean, so.
Okay.
I would agree with Sue on that. To send it to L&I with the question of, does this conflict with anything that you currently have, you know, and or should this remain in the building code?
Okay, great. So the next one is 1509.1.
Yeah, this is the one that I was referring to, where it was all a brand new like section of the code, which I don't believe it was there was nothing in the 2018. So this is the one where I would like the fire experts to kind of weigh in.
I think Kin was here.
Yeah, I'm here. I just not have seen this before. So I think I need to compare it to the document, which is going to be presented at the fire code tag this afternoon, to see if there's any discrepancies, if we made any changes to this section. I was trying to go back to where I'm starting right now. It's the standpipe supply and working my way backwards on this. And unfortunately, it's hard for us to see what the fire code tag change is, since we did a renumbering of all of chapter 33 of the fire code for this. So does this section in the existing building code have anything to do with our mass timber construction? Do they have anything in there? And should we be putting that in there since we have it in the fire code? So I'm looking at vertical construction of types, 3, 4, and 5. Construction, do they have? I see the 1 and 2. So if you want to correlate, this is where I would think staff could correlate between the two codes to make sure that it's consistent with what's being done in the fire code in chapter 33, and then also in here.
Well, keep in mind that the staff is only 4 people.
So what are you suggesting, Stoyan?
Well, I would appreciate any help.
Well, none of these documents were on the website for us to look at prior to the meeting, unless I'm incorrect. If you can show me, when I clicked on the documents from the agenda, it didn't give me any documents on the agenda.
Okay, we'll take care of it then.
It's odd that they would add so much to this section in the IEBC. New construction, that all makes sense, but existing buildings, you're assuming that the existing building is there. So it's just odd, but I agree. It needs research.
To clarify why this might apply to an existing building, you may be adding on or changing the site, and that may impact water supply, depending on what's going on. So it certainly
Yeah.
could apply. Oh, and Mike, it also includes relocated buildings.
So my suggestion is to
Yeah, thanks.
my suggestion to have the fire code tag look at this to make sure that it's correlated, and we didn't do anything in the fire code tag that would need to have changes in this 1509. Because trying to do this on the fly right now is very difficult.
Okay, let's table it for now. Andrew?
All right, did we have any additional sections sent to you?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
option-
Actually,
So this is all I received.
okay, should we vote on what we have with 15, or we tabled enough that we'll come back to that?
We have to come back to it anyway, so
Okay,
no vote is needed.
all right. Okay, so we have a couple more chapters to get done. It sounds like that won't get done until after the full council meeting anyway.
Yeah, it seems this way, yes. Mhm.
All righty, so we've got plenty of time, as do I, to get the rest of our chapters done. Anything else for the good of the order?
Are you coming to other business now on your agenda?
Yes, Stoyan, can you pull the agenda back up? Thank you, Ken. So Ken, did you have other business?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted,
Okay, floor is yours.
is there any way I can share my screen? I wanted to talk about the emergency amendment that was done for elevators.
You can share the screen.
Okay, let me get to that point here. All right, put Stoyan in the background here. Here we go. So this is something I'm bringing up to the tag today, the fire code tag, regarding trying to make this an easier code section to find. And I talked to Dave Cocott today, and after discussions with Kevin Marr, another fire code tag member. So this is the existing emergency amendment that went in to eliminate fire sprinklers in the elevator pits. But what I've done is trying to make a better pointer in the IFC and IBC, so you don't have to go into chapter 35 in the IBC or chapter 80 in the IFC, and then have to go into NFPA 13 to see where it was removed, so to speak, or not going to be enforced. So in the items in red here is what I'm proposing to change to the tag. And I'm just hoping that the building code tag would also agree with it, and then we can try to move it onward and upward. So the first part again is just the reference standard is that stays there, but we're going to add automatic sprinkler systems where required. And in IFC and IBC, it's in the 903.2 section. And the language that we're looking at adding here is at the very beginning in 903.2 is to add the exception for clarification. And it would be adding exception number 2, which is at the bottom of elevator hoistway in an enclosed and non-combustible elevator shaft. And so I took this language, proposed it, sent it over to Dave Cocott this morning. He thinks it's fine, and it does make it easier for people to find it. So they're not going to have to go look in chapter 80, where it's listed up here in the fire code, and chapter 35 in the building code, and then have to go into 13 to find that you're not enforcing this one specific standard 8.15.5.3 number 5. So just trying to clarify it and hoping that we can put this or amend the emergency rule to include this change here with the adding this exception. So just looking for any comments from the building code tag on this.
It can, so these are additions, right? We still have the exact language that was approved, and then we would be adding this as well.
Exactly. That's all I'm looking at doing is just adding this so it's easier to find, because it's going to be extremely hard for a user to find this.
Okay, and then one more question that I have, then other people may. Do you think we need any clarifying language there? We say non-combustible elevator shaft. Anything adding you think we need for hydraulic elevators, or so that it's clear that even if you have a combustible fluid down there, this exception still applies.
Yeah, and that's the language that was actually brought out at NFPA 13 just to clarify it. And that was the intention. It didn't matter either way, combustible. I mean, having hydraulic oil or not, it did not matter. The proposal was, hey, we just don't need that sprinkler head in that pit area.
Is there such a thing as a combustible elevator shaft?
I do not know.
Okay, if everyone else thinks that's a silly concern of mine, that if it could be interpreted that if you have a combustible liquid, that exception wouldn't apply, but I could see that potentially happening, so I wanted to point that out.
Andrew, I had a suggestion on this.
Yep.
And I talked to Ken about this a little bit this morning. This is currently an emergency rule, and we've also put it in the 2021 code. Being that we will be working on the 2021 code to get this language in there, that allows us to do the emergency rule one more time. So being that we already have an emergency rule and it's touching on the reference standards, we will be redoing the emergency rule again in, I think it's January or February. And being that will be a new emergency rule, I wonder if that would be the best time to put these into play. So we're not doing an emergency rule on top of an existing emergency rule.
Ken, would you be okay with that? So basically we need to renew that emergency rule after 3 months. So when we renew it, we just amend it.
Yeah, we'll have to re-up it anyways, and we're not changing the language by anything. We're just putting a pointer. So when we do it in January or February, that would be the perfect time to do this, and it wouldn't raise a bunch of red flags.
And this sounds much easier for staff since they're limited on bodies. So I agree, this is a great way to do this.
Okay. Do we need any vote, or because it's just pointers, you think it's administrative?
I would appreciate it, just an acceptance from the building code tag, since I'm going to be presented to the fire code tag also. Yeah, I just would like somebody to, so I can try to be as official as possible on this.
Oh, well, I will fire back with your comment that we didn't have the time to see that. I just saw it the first time. I think some of the TAG members may feel the same. If they don't, then.
Well, then you better be careful, because everything that you've done in this meeting today didn't meet that either.
Yeah, okay. Ken, they look like pretty simple changes. So I'll rule it in order. I'm comfortable doing that. So as long as we have two folks to make a motion in a second, then we can
also
make a recommendation.
Sorry, Andrew, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Right.
Being that we have till January or February, we have plenty of time to vote on this.
I don't mind making a vote to recommend that to say we looked at it and we're fine with it, and that, so Ken can take that to the fire tag. I think that's what he's looking for. So I don't see why we can't give that to him.
I'm just looking for a consensus. I mean, that's it.
Okay. Is anyone opposed to Ken saying that the building code tag had a consensus that this was appropriate language and made the code easier? All right, Ken, you've got a consensus.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any additional other business? All right, and that was the end of our agenda, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. And we'll see you, what, I think in 2 weeks or next week.
I don't think next week. We have the council meeting next week.
Okay,
There won't be a TAG meeting next week after the council meeting.
okay, sounds good. All right, I'll see some of you on Friday.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.